The Supreme Court today began hearing a batch of 20 petitions seeking to legalize same-sex marriages. It was a five-judge constitution bench that was hearing this case, headed by the Chief Justice of India. Remember, just before this, the centre had dubbed the demand as an urban elitist concept. Stressing whether the batch of petitions filed is maintainable or not, the centre questioned the Supreme Court's competence to entertain same-sex marriage demand. So is India on the right track, or is legalization of same-sex marriages still a distant dream? I have with me filmmaker Onir, who has been an activist as far as the LGBTQI rights are concerned. Onir, we appreciate you taking out the time and joining us here on CNN News 18. I want to first begin by understanding how hopeful are you today, considering the fact the bench headed by the Chief Justice of India is hearing these pleas. It's been 4 years since the decriminalization happened in India. Do you think the country is taking steps in the right direction?
With Justice Chandrachud, there one always feels a sense of hope, and that's what I think the entire community is feeling today. And very often that there are also people who say that the country is not ready, but our lives can't be waiting for when the majority in the country will be ready to accept us, celebrate us. We have waited for years and years and years for decriminalization. Almost for a lot of us, an entire lifetime has passed by, and now I feel that this constant trying to push it, saying that it is something for the legislature to decide. If it was, then they would have, if they really cared for our lives, they would have taken it up in the parliament and got it moved it. And because it's never happened, be it what was the Supreme Court's guidelines for the Nalsa verdict, that there should be some reservation for the trans community.
Yeah.
That has never happened after years and years. Similarly, if we had to leave it to the legislature, I think we would have to wait, I don't know how many more decades. And that is when the uh, doors of legislature is closed to you because of populist measures, then the only hope you have is the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
which is supposed to hold up the fundamental rights of every citizen of this country, and that is what the community expects from the Supreme Court, and we are hopeful about it.
Onir, I want to understand before we get into the struggles of how far we've come, or how much of the struggle is still left. Just before this very crucial hearing, you in fact had the centre saying that this entire demand of legalization of same-sex marriages is a quote-unquote urban elitist concept. How did you see that remark?
It just comes from a space where you realize that these people have not even made an effort to understand the community, have a dialogue with the community, or maybe they've not even made an effort to meet people from the community. If they did that, they would realize that sexuality has nothing to do with class,
Sure.
caste, religion, race, whether you're poor or rich, whether you live in Mumbai or in a remote village anywhere in India, and there are enough evidence of that. And one of the most shining evidence, perhaps, is Dhuti Chand, who is an Olympian, makes our country proud, and she comes from a rural background, and she stays with a partner, and I'm sure that her aspirations, like many other people who come from rural, is the same as ours. How
Yeah.
can anyone, take this position that someone coming from rural India does not have the same sense of
Hmm.
wanting happiness, wanting dignity, and wanting the same rights as everyone. It is demeaning people who come from rural India.
Onir, I also want to talk about the struggles as far as demanding what is a fundamental right. Legalization of marriage, adoption of kids, owning property, these are issues that we've spoken time and again, and these are being constant demands from the community at large as well. I want to go back to a comment that we just heard about 48 hours ago from the NCPCR as far as adoption by same-sex couples are concerned. Here, the NCPCR chief has gone on to say that if these demands are legalized, if there is adoption that happens by same-sex couples, that in fact, quote-unquote, will affect social and psychological aspects of those children who've been adopted. Do you think there is still a talk that needs to happen as far as change of mindset is concerned?
One is, of course, I feel that it comes from a space of homophobia. I remember there was a point when the High Court judge, Chennai High Court judge, had clearly said that people who are in the judiciary needs to be sensitized about queer rights to be able to be participating in any kind of judgment. So these people who make these kind of comments need to be sensitized because they come from utter lack of knowledge and also fear, because they've never made an attempt to understand. One, if they are so, when they talk about queer parents bringing up a child, there's this fear that they keep underlining that maybe the child will also turn out queer. That one, it comes from a space where you look down upon queer people, that if a child is born queer, you start discriminating and shaming the person right
Yeah,
from birth. And if it was something that was about influence, then all of us, we have been born in heterosexual families.
mm,
We've been surrounded by heterosexual values. When I was born and when I was raised in school, I didn't have any reference point of what is gay
sure.
because we didn't exist in cinema, in literature, in advertisements, in history, in biology, nowhere. But that didn't change me from being who I am.
Mm,
So if a child is raised by a queer couple, why should that child be any different from how he, she, they are supposed to be anyway? I think this comes from homophobia. Also, one needs to understand that queer people are like heterosexual people, flawed, good, bad. We are a mix of everything.
sure.
And when any child is adopted, be it by heterosexual or homosexual couples, there has to be counseling, there has to be monitoring for the
Mm,
child's safety, and that goes for everybody. It is not specific to queer couples.
sure.
I feel by trying to deny us the right to adopt children, you not only are being unjust to us, but you also deny many children who are staying miserable lives in orphanages the possibility of home, the possibility of love, the
Sure.
possibility of having parents.
Yeah. Onir, I want to talk to you about your own struggle at this point as well, considering the fact you've been extremely open, you fought so that, you could become an example for others and possibly it could become easier for others to come forward. But even then, going back to what I said when I started, that the basic fundamental rights are still a struggle: marriage, adoption, property. What are the kind of challenges that you still have to face on a day-to-day basis?
I feel that, it's a small thing. Like today, if a gay person has to, make a house and wants to do it with his partner, you can't because you're not considered to be
Mm,
legally married. If you, even a small thing, if my partner has an accident tomorrow and I have to go to the hospital and there is a decision that can be life endangering, I am not authorized to
yeah,
sign to save the life of someone I love. And that, how cruel is that? So I feel that there are various people just see this marriage as a social,
mm,
ritual. No, it's far beyond that. It's about, people are commenting on Twitter and everywhere out of, again, homophobia and lack of knowledge. Oh, but you can live in. But the rights that a live-in couple have and the rights that a married couple have are totally different,
yeah,
And moreover, it's not about you can have that. What entitles you to decide what I am
sure.
entitled get or not? Why should I be denied of any other right that my fellow citizens who are heterosexuals and who are the majority have?
Yeah. Onir, I also want to talk, considering the fact you're a filmmaker, what's happening as far as content is concerned. Even though today there is a lot of content that is being made, keeping the sensitivity around the LGBTQI community, there is wide acceptance as well. But despite that, it's not been a bed of roses. And you've time and again spoken about your own struggles as well. When you had a script about a gay army officer that was rejected, how much progress have we made as far as the content that we put out and with the intent that we put out that content as well?
I think there's still a lot of resistance. In one side, of course, there's a mandate that we have to do some LGBTQI, so you will see platforms and
Mm,
studios a little bit. But I feel empowerment cannot be tokenism.
mm,
I feel that it is also about empowering queer people. who have been, working, making films about us. Very often, the films that you see, the narrative that you see, are all from a very heteronormative gauge of what is acceptable,
Sure.
and it's very often does not empower the queer gauge. And I've been constantly talking about the importance, and I ask this question all the time: why is someone like Sridhar, why someone like me, who have been working as filmmakers narrating queer stories for decades now, are not the ones making the films? Why are we not being empowered? We always
Hmm.
talk about how important it is for women to be empowered to talk of the feminine gaze. But somewhere I feel that understanding, that urgency that queer people need to be empowered to tell their story before the camera and behind the camera. A trans person needs to be, cast to play a trans role and not
Yeah.
a cisgender man and woman, because it's not about sexuality, it's about someone who is from a different gender, and this is discrimination. And these things are
Yeah.
not addressed. If you look at Hollywood, you'll see year after year, be it in the Oscars, wherever, uh, the community, the narratives of the queer community are empowered through recognition. You don't have it in our industry.
Yeah.
I see, after decades of work, also my industry
Hmm.
embrace it, and the homophobia is not evident, but
Sure.
it's silently there.
Yeah. So you still feel we've made some progress, but we're still a long way to go where we're first seen as equals and then anything else. Honor, always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for taking our time and joining us for this conversation.
Thank you.